let's move on to the next question here. And I wonder, have you been thinking, Shawn?
I have been. Yeah,
Okay.
let's go with first of the month.
So, first of the month, I was so hoping you would pick that. So hoping, right? What is the question behind first of the month? What are the best and worst practices in usage-based billing? All right, so we're going to move a little bit downstream here. What do you think are some of the best and worst techniques in billing? So you have metered billing that go ahead and bills you later on for some actual usage. You got a tiered system that allows you to have usage up to a certain limit. But then you have an overage charge if you go over. Sometimes they don't do overages. Sometimes they'll just bump you up to the next tier and then you have to pay the next tier, right? Some defer billing around there. So there's a lot of techniques out there in how to bill for usage. And damn it, I know the answer is it depends. Okay, I know that's always the answer. But I want to make sure that we can get a good point of view, Shawn, from you in thinking about, okay, usage-based billing, here are some of the big do's and don'ts in my mind. And I want to hear from you. What is it, Shawn?
Yeah. Okay, so there's so many places I want to take this because in this journey at ServiceTrade, we've had so many of these debates. So let's talk about usage billing versus licensure. Now sometimes it's gonna depend, but in our application, we initially considered usage billing. How many work orders are they running through the platform versus a license model? And that way we can right size it with the size of the company. And ultimately, what we kind of decided was we don't want users to be timid to use the app because it's going to cost them money. So that was a bad model for us. And generally speaking, I think if you have a model that is going to make a user on every click or every decision, make them reluctant because they might have to spend money, that's going to reduce adoption and reduce expansion and put you at risk and reduce your overall growth. So you need to have packages that are clearly designed so that they can get in there and do what they need to, but let them grow into it as needed. And it's real hard in some cases to do that, but I think there are great examples of companies that usage billing might have been the easy way out and they figured out how to package it. Another point, the great gate debate. Do you gate users from using more with some purchase or to buy a new license? You cannot add a new license until you pay us, or do you catch them in the rears? We've gone back and forth on this for years, and I think it can definitely streamline some things at scale. But one, it can be expensive to implement from an R&D perspective, right? And have that tie into your financial systems and all match up and reconcile, all that good stuff. It can be expensive, and small companies have scarce R&D resources. But also, it's the same thing. You're stopping the user from just using the application and then having a conversation with them later. Now, I think you need to make it really damn clear that, hey, this user is a paid user. We're not going to make it hard for you to add them, but just know it's paid. We'll get in touch with you about this, right? Now, I think that'll depend on how transactional your product is versus what the license cost is that we're talking about here, and the size of your or your capacity for account managers to kind of true that up.
True.
The last one was just an interest. I would say it was an interesting lesson. We kind of knew it was going to happen, but we didn't realize how big of an impact it was going to have. And that we actually initially didn't have clear indicators in our application of what was being considered a used license, right? It was not necessarily you're clicking this button to provision this license for us to have that conversation we just talked about. We tried to base it on usage. Did the user use certain things within the application that suggest they are paid? And then we try and catch up with folks and say, okay, you used 76 licenses. You only have contracted 72. You need to buy 4 more. They go, I didn't really use them. And it led to too much ambiguity in the conversation. And when we finally set up a strict this is what it means to provision a license. Again, they didn't have to pay to get it because we cited on that side of the great gate debate. It made those conversations so much more streamlined. It's like, go to the list, there it is, that's what you're paying for. And so we actually saw a massive uptick for about 12 months after we deployed that. Like that one light feature led to a massive revenue jump that, we kind of modeled out, hey, this will give us an increase. We were not expecting it to be so high.
That's a major swing. Lauren, I need you to jump in on this one because you've not only seen it in one, but you've seen it across multiple companies, usage-based billing, the great gate debate. I like that. What's your take on that?
It is definitely a challenge, I'd say, especially at the scale our companies are at. Um, Many are also in the exploratory phase of, I think, especially with just how the market has changed, just getting beat up on a lot of user-based pricing models, thinking about where can we bring in more usage components or just other levers to pricing broadly. And one of the things I'm always trying to emphasize is if you can't track it yourself and if you can't show it back to your customers, then we can't do it. And I think especially that first point of can we even track it is often a challenge at this scale, right? Do we have good data on what's happening in our product already? And I think to Shawn's point, that visibility piece becomes so key because then we're having reactive conversations around value and we're getting into nitpicking on, oh, well, that user just logged in once or they're not with our company anymore. So, I meant to take him out of the system. That's not us having a conversation as an account manager or a customer success manager as a partner to them or as let me show you the value of our platform. And so I think approaching this from a place where, hey, we can show them where they're at, whether it's something we can do in the product or it's an actual person doing this. Hey, you're at 80% of your licenses, or hey, I've just been tracking your usage throughout this quarter. Looks like you're tracking a little ahead of pace. Maybe it's time to have a conversation about moving the next tier. I think that takes this from a reactive to a proactive piece. And that reactive mode is where I think the biggest challenges with usage-based billing get into play.
I love that. I love that. And so what I'm looking at, me and the way my brain works, right, is different frameworks. So I'm hearing between the two of you guys that when it comes to usage-based billing, you want to pick something that is clear, something you can count, and something they can actually do unconsciously, meaning they're not constantly trying to figure out, am I going to spend more money if I do this, or am I going to get the value? Yeah. And that brings in I think the criteria you can think about for should we bill on this thing or not. Lauren, I've seen multiple companies out there that are billing for something they can't see, they can't track or measure, and it never ends well. It never ends well at that stage, right? But I always think about my old Netflix example, where if Netflix were to charge me for every minute I viewed or every show I watched, my behavior would change, right? And that's not always easy to kind of suss out in the beginning, which goes back to your point about, do you even have information on what folks are doing and be able to track all that telemetry, all those metrics? If you have the information, then you can make a call on which ones you want to kind of tease out as your top candidates. You test them, and then from there, you can then roll it out. Sounds easy when I say it. Actually, that's like months of work right there that I just said a few seconds ago. Shawn, you think this is crazy talk?
No, I don't at all. And I wanted to pile in on that Netflix example because, usage-based billing can, I just said don't do that because they're going to be worried about every time they do take an action, it's going to cost them money. But if every action is providing value, they won't necessarily question that. And so Netflix is a perfect example of that. Every minute of Netflix is not equal. There are times where all of us have sat down to watch Netflix and we're like, I'm excited to watch this show. Umbrella Academy season 4 is out or coming out soon. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to enjoy that. But there are also other times where I am beat. My wife and I are beat at the end of the day, and we just ate. We got the toddler down. We're wiped. We just ate a big meal, and we're not going to bed yet. But we need 30 minutes of just brain off, and we're going to pop on Seinfeld or something like that. And that is not valuable Netflix time. And if I had to pay for that, I would stop watching it then. Right? I would only watch it for those valuable moments, and I would distinguish between those.
Yeah, there is usage so that's a very big thing you just pointed out, is that there's an assumption that all usage is uniform, it's all equal, it's all the same, but that may not be true all the time, right? And I'm thinking about even like real estate software during the summer peak seasons, or a fun one here, a snowplow platform. Yes, a snowplow platform, and that during the winter versus during the summer has very different value as well. Lauren, have you seen this in your companies too?
Definitely. I think that seasonality component here, or whatever kind of the factor might be, like it's a theme we're kind of touching on broadly here, which is everything pricing wise needs to come back to how we're thinking about value. Value might be different for different products, how different users use it, different times of year, et cetera. And that all requires us to just really know our customer and know how they're using our product. And so I think a lot of this just comes back to basics. And having kind of sometimes tough conversations that seem silly to have, like what does our product do for different users? Why do they purchase us? Answering those big questions is where I spend a lot of time with our companies. And at first they kind of look at me like, we all know that. And then we spend an hour and a half discussing it because we're on 10 different little pages. But we get there. We get there.
Yes. No, thumbs up on that one. If you ask, why do they buy? Why do you exist? All those key things. It sounds like an obvious answer, right? And you're kind of thinking around it. But then when you really push them to write it down, you'll get, and yet like 5 people do it. You have 5 people write it down, they'll give you 6 different answers, is what I've seen, right? So for me, that's a really worthwhile exercise. Let me go ahead and punch out one more hot take on this one, which is overage pricing, meaning if you go over a limit or if you use more than you're supposed to, you get dinged with a higher transaction fee. For it, against it, and tell me why. Let's start with you, Shawn, because I see you smiling.
I've got your favorite answer. It depends, right? I know our AWS bill has
Get him out of here.
got to be variable. There's no way we would get away with it not being variable to some degree. But I know for our customers, if we dinged them with more than they expected to charge, they would be ultra sensitive to that. So I think it depends on the expectations of the consumer. Engineers buying meter-based applications kind of get it. That's the world they live in. As we scale up our user base and usage, we're going to pay more for these things that are critical to our infrastructure. Whereas, our customers, if we were aligned it to their work orders that were all over the place, they would not be okay with that.
I think Shawn hit it perfectly. It's that criticality of the plus one, right? Like if the incremental value, and if our engineering team went over capacity because we were shipping a bunch of new features and we were setting up a new customer in a new region, and those were all things we had to do, that's very different than someone on another team added a bunch of users they shouldn't have, and none of those people actually needed to be in the system, and we accidentally went over our tier. Did that change anything for our product? Did it do anything different for our business? Can I have a rational conversation with my boss's boss on why we had to spend more here? So I think, to Shawn's point, it depends, but I do think it comes down to the criticality of what we're doing and what that changes when we go over. And I think it goes back to the points on communication too. If we have given them absolutely no visibility that they've gone over, and our product is super easy to ship additional things and there's no indication that I'm anywhere close. Or I think another big point with usage is who has the ability to do it. I think in SaaS broadly, we want everyone to be able to do everything. But when everyone has the ability to contribute to what we're charging for, if I'm the account owner and I'm the person who's signing the checks at the end of the day, and I find out a bunch of people I wouldn't have wanted to have the ability to drive overages for us are the ones driving overages. That's very different than me driving overages myself.
That's a good point. Where does the overage even come from? Why did it happen? The business criticality. So it depends on the overage to see what and how you handle it is the key there, right? There are some folks out there who would say, no matter what, you should never punish someone for using your product more, is what they'll say. And if they would say, they would scream that to the top of their lungs. But there are cases where it may make sense to either monetize it or use it to position something else, right? So that's an angle that you can also take and be flexible and collaborative at the end of it, right? Awesome. You guys, one final takeaway from you, Shawn, on just the overall usage-based billing before we move back to Lauren for the next topic. Big number one takeaway from this whole convo.
Well, I might not even go with the takeaway. Just one more additional point here I mean, you also have to look at your user base and willingness to pay, and going back to the attaching the value in our early conversations about usage, considering usage as a pricing model against work orders. We pretty quickly realized it's going to vary a lot by company, and be misaligned with their willingness to pay. Where one industry might only do a couple work orders a day, while another might be doing 10 with the same number of technicians, and we're not capturing that willingness to pay because ultimately they're trying to drive the same, hey, $300,000 to $500,000 a year per tech in revenue. They're just doing it with different approaches. So it wouldn't align with willingness to pay. So attaching that to the area they are and understanding there's value there, whereas our customers view their office users as a cost center, and we don't want to attach our value as a cost center and them thinking about reducing the user count there. We want to attach to the user count that they want to grow, as opposed to, if you're selling sales software, you probably don't want to be seen as attached to the cost of ops, but the cost of sales growth and productivity, right? So I think that's where Gong has done a great job, attached to that growing user base as opposed to the cost center of ops people and managers.
Don't attach value to a cost center. That is very, very key. Lauren, one last one from you.
Oh God, I feel like Shawn's just got better takes on this one. I think the biggest last thing I'll emphasize is just no one likes to be surprised. At least a bad surprise, right? If we're giving them something for free or saying, hey, great, you're using our product a lot. Don't worry about it. Maybe we'll have a conversation around bumping you up to the next tier for the next billing period. That's a good surprise. A bad surprise is getting a large bill that now you have to rationalize to someone else in your business. So I think thinking about what types of surprises you are giving to your customers, are you helping them do their job better? That is probably the number one thing most of our software companies are trying to do. And if you're making them have hard conversations with their boss, that's probably not helping them do their job better.
Here to that. I just had shudders from those old cell phone bills from back in the day that used to get surprised. You're like,
Yes.
Why the hell is my bill 10 times more this month? Right? It was because grandma called me on a Friday and whatever.
Yes.
Right? So,
Speaking of those old cell phone bills, do you remember that we used to pay money for ringback tones? That was a thing that we, as a society, used to buy.
that we attached value to that tone, Shawn. Come on, man. Whenever you're in a crowd and your phone rings, I mean, it was it. That was the
Yeah.
It's crazy how far we've come since then.